All right. Let me just make sure the audio is getting picked up here. Yeah, it is. And so with this, I guess we'll turn off lights for this one. One thing that I was going to mention is right now is the time to start looking for internships. Some close in October, and then some won't open until like April. It just depends on the company. So you can tell the companies that like procrastinate because they're the ones that are emailing me and like, oh, we're looking for a safety intern, in May. And I'm saying, well, I think most of my students already have their plans. But anyway, so.
After the last day here, we fly there.
Well, no, just they're late. They're late to the game, and there might be students still looking for internships, but generally most people have their plans, whether they're doing an internship or not. They know what they're gonna do. So anyway, so be looking right now.
Is it paid? I read one of the emails Professor Fogelman sent, and then there's one in Georgia. It's Delta. Is it paid?
Generally, they're paid. Yeah, I wouldn't. I mean, you should be able to find a paid internship.
How about the housing?
It'll depend on the company. So each is dependent on the company. They'll have their own things. Some will give you relocation money, and some won't. So like Lakin, they gave him a check for $2,000 to cover his relocation to Southern California. And I know he didn't spend $2,000 to relocate down there, but anyway, he might need that to get to Indiana. I don't know. Although he can still fit his house in his car, but anyway, it just depends. But be looking, and if you ever want me to look at a resume or cover letter, let me know. So, do you want to go over this one? I think most people got this. I'm not going to look at the percentages, but I think I remember which ones.
Why don't you put them on?
I can. I'm just I don't know if I want to do that. I guess I'll do it. So we will just do that. So I lied in the message I sent. I made 9 of the 11 worth of 0. There are 2 that I thought we covered that twice, and I feel like you should have known it. We'll talk about them today to see what you think, if that's a fair assessment on my part or not.
So the second email that you sent us with our grade, whatever out of 32, is that one correct one?
What is our ultimate grade out there?
The second email that you got, the updated email, is the grade that, as of right now, that you have for the exam.
Okay.
So, most of you got this one. It was, I feel like it was pretty straightforward. I think this one got removed. I really didn't cover it enough, probably. Besides determining appropriate respirator. And generally, I mean, we did talk about it a little bit, but I mean, it's not like we spent a lot of time on that. But anyway, so, finding a good fit or finding the right respirator isn't that hard compared to collecting a bunch of samples and figuring out, what your average concentration is, your and running some stats on your concentrations to see, for example, if you're not, if the upper confidence limit is still below the PEL, for example. Most of you got this, I think.
What's the thing?
The primary purpose of workers'
Yeah.
compensation.
Yeah, the whole sentence for that.
So, let me, dang it.
Maybe we should just go back to how it was originally for you to see all the answers.
Yeah, I'll just go.
I know you'll know the right answer. So
I'm gonna go to preview. Details. Okay. This should show it to us. Yeah. I mean, for the numbers, I won't remember exactly, but we can talk about the equation and how to do it. So, primary purpose of workers' compensation, it's not to provide benefits. It's not to provide a safe and healthy working environment. That's what OSHA is for. It's this one. It's to compensation if you've been injured. I don't know which number is the right answer, but I could show you how to plug in the numbers if you want to. But I think most people got these financial ones. So so there are only 2 of these that we covered in class. So I kind of dropped it down to a 50-50. What is the right answer here? So you're looking at the probability of a catastrophic event. Fault tree, yes. So fault tree analysis will look at probabilities. Failure modes and effect analysis, or FMEA or FMECA, it doesn't look at probabilities necessarily. I mean, we score risks, but yes. I think most people got this one as well. I don't remember, but we did go over this a couple of times in class. Yeah, I think you're right. I think it is this top one. Yeah, I usually try and anticipate common errors, and I calculate out the answer for that error. Not always, but sometimes. So I did that on here, like rounding, unit conversion here. And some are just made up. I run out of ideas for what could someone do to mess up. Anyway, so yeah, so it was this one, and we went over it a couple of times. If someone wants more explanation, let me know. We didn't really cover this, but I think most people got this. I had mentioned, just think about this, but so substance abuse and conflicts. This, I mean, low morale, possibly. Lost productivity, maybe. And these 2 just don't really make sense.
So did you throw that?
I don't remember. I think most of you got it, though. And in the review, I talked about this. Yeah, be plumb, level, and squared. They should have outriggers or be anchored to the wall, but I don't think these numbers are right.
Wasn't that a mobile scaffold?
Yeah, for mobile
There's a
scaffolding.
difference between mobile and fixed.
Yeah, so mobile can be anchored, fixed
Has to be.
should be, yes, as OSHA would say, shall be or must be anchored to the wall. Above, I think it's like, I don't know how many levels, but probably after the first level. What is this one? So this is the lecture that I recorded only, like we didn't meet in class, was the ergonomics lecture. And I mentioned it and the slides mention it. Yes. So ventilate, I mean, anything with ventilation you can throw out. That doesn't make sense. Employee height doesn't really make sense. So yeah, it's B. And this was more of a recordable injury question than about bloodborne pathogens. But any injury, whether it's bloodborne or some other incident that results in which of these is something that you have to record versus one that you don't have to record. So if it's a treatment beyond first aid, you have to record that. Yes. Loss of consciousness, you have to record that. If they're missing work, you have to record that. Yes. So skin irritation, if they're a little itchy or something, you don't have to write that down. So first rule of management. Yeah. So who would be responsible, most responsible here? Ultimately, the president, right? Although, I mean, some of these people, if something bad happens, some of these people might go to jail. but the president. So usually, if you hear about someone like criminal charges for a company because of negligence in a safety-related incident, you'll see the CEO and the safety manager. Usually, those two are the ones that are getting targeted.
They go to
Yeah.
don't necessarily lose.
Yeah. Job transfer. Right. I think even in the review, I missed this one. But what do you guys think?
Third one.
B.
So I believe it's C. I'm
You believe?
Yeah, I know. And it's not quality control, so we can throw that out. It's not management desires, we can throw that out. It's B or C. Circadian rhythms doesn't make sense either. Yeah, it's C. So you can see how, like, when I see a problem that I don't know the answer, I'm looking for anything that will disqualify any of the options, and then I throw that out and eliminate everything that doesn't make sense. Anyway, yeah, so that would be C. So this one, it is in the digest that I recommend you guys have the PDF copy of. Unfortunately, I think it's probably, who knows, but
1/8.
Yep, 1/8 of an inch. So the rest, work rest, is 1/8, and the guard at the top, the tongue, is 1/4. So why do you think this is the max that these should be away from the wheel? What's the issue? So this is an abrasive wheel, a grinding wheel. You have a piece of material that you're grinding on.
So it doesn't lodge between the wheel and the work platform.
You want to keep that space tiny so that if it's wood or metal, it doesn't get caught in there, and then who knows what's going to happen.
What'd you say the answer was?
1/8. This we threw out. More than half of you missed it. So I think not only do you have to do the standard deviation, but then you have to apply that to how many standard deviations from the average. And most people missed this one, so you got thrown out.
Is it because at the bottom you have n and it should be n minus 1? Yep.
Well, so this is the equation that, so I borrowed this question and this is the equation they used, but I also had the same
So if I,
thought that this is not a population, it's a sample, but it's what they used. So the thing is, regardless of what the standard deviation is, if you look at this distribution, sorry, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say, so I wouldn't have gotten a wrong answer if I corrected it to be n minus 1, or would I have gotten the wrong answer?
It's not going to make a huge difference.
My answer seemed legitimate, so.
It's not going to make a huge difference. I mean, the equations are so similar. I think that's the only difference, really, right? Besides the symbols. I agree. This is not a population, and I guess I can just go ahead and change that. Make a call, but the percentage of shovel loads that will be less than 22, given this data set, if this is representative, I mean, how many shovel loads are going to be more than 22? Probably not a lot. And so it's probably that one, right? Without doing any math.
Well, I was going to say, I was like, I feel like I calculated something that made sense, so.
Yeah. To be honest, when I did this myself, I didn't do the math. I was taking a time test, and I looked at it and I was like, yeah. And sometimes you have to do that if it's a timed exam. And you're like, this like, if I do all the math on this, is going to take me 3 minutes. Do I have 3 minutes? No. Let me guess.
So when you take the actual test, you'll crunch for time?
No,
Okay.
I had extra time. And I think most of you would probably be in the same boat. If you've prepared, you'll have time. And so, and for me, to be honest, both on the CSP and the CIH, I was actually glad to see the math because I knew I could work out the right answer. But like on the CIH, for example, my weakest area was toxicology. So basically, you have to know what disease causes which symptoms, or memorization. And I hate memorizing stuff. So anyway, things I was familiar with, I could deal with, but that was the hardest thing for me. And most of you got this, so I keep going, and we covered it at least a couple times. This one, this is one of the ones that I have not tossed, but more. Oh no, I did toss this. I guess I can go back and check, but if I didn't, I should have. And it was really the way I worded the question, I think, was what was wrong with this. I should have made it clear that there are 2 hammers, each at 100 decibels. And that's not super clear.
Oh, yes, I just took it as an air compressor, air hammer for.
Yeah. Yep. So I figured we covered this. You guys should have got it. And because most of you didn't, regardless of what the problem is, I assume the problem is with me. And I think it's the wording on this one. So
I have a question about that one.
Yeah.
So since you start with the lowest ones, you would have a 90 and a 100. Since the difference between them is 10, would you add 0?
yeah.
Okay.
So there's nothing you would do there. So you would really just look at the 2 100s, combine them, and you'll get 103. This one, I don't remember how you guys did. I can't remember. I think this was also the recorded lecture. So
We discussed this.
we did cover this in the review.
Move the equation around to do it.
Right. So, you're looking for one of the distances, and to be honest, it doesn't matter which you assign to which. Is this the counterweight side? The distance and the weight. Or is this anyway? But solve for the D of one of the sides, and then plug everything in. Just make sure it's in the right place. You can get. I don't remember what the number is, but I think you guys got that one. Yeah, so this is class K. Most of you, I think, got that one. Most of you missed this one. This is one that I have left. But I wanted to just talk and see what your thoughts are. Because I thought you guys would get this one. And I don't know. So what terms can we combine to just equal a constant always?
The 11.5 feet.
Right, 11.5 feet. And you know what? I think you guys did the math right, mostly, but it was the regulation. So there were these, I think the math comes out to 22.5. And, but what is the regulation for free fall distance, which is this term here? 6 feet. So if the free fall distance, and the free fall distance is like, if this is the answer, then the free fall distance was 10 plus 11, or no, it was 11 plus 11.5 would give you 22.5, but 11 is way over the, yeah. Something is gonna snap, maybe the lanyard, and then you'll just keep falling. Anyway, so I don't know. I'll think about that one, I guess. There were any strong objections to this one where something wasn't clear, or most of you got this. So environmental is what? Which one of those? 14,001. Most of you missed this, and I threw it out. We didn't cover it in lecture, though it was on the slide, and I said, know these. But like I said, I don't really like memorization, at least long memorization, and I'm okay throwing that out. These concepts were in the recorded lecture for ergonomics. Not this exactly, but and this is kind of a weird question. So what would definitely affect the ergonomics? Okay. Yeah. And then having a slip resistant handle and being thick enough that you can, so you're not like, I mean, if this chef has big man hands or something, and it's a little tiny, handle, that doesn't work, right? Or the reverse, if the chef has tiny T-Rex hands and it's a big fat knife, then that doesn't work either. So anyway, so the blade length doesn't really matter. I mean, it would if you go to extremes, I think, but
It's got a longer arm, which means moment that you're putting into.
So it would affect the center of gravity. Yeah, I guess.
But that's why the blade and handle are well balanced.
So I would probably have to reword this a little bit to say it has the least impact, but having a blade that's less than 8 inches long, you think that would help the knife, right? To have a lower blade, but I mean,
Ergonomics-wise, it's not the most impact. It's the least.
Yeah,
They all have impacts.
I think most of you got this one. Span of control is ideally what? 3 to 7, and ideally 5. If you think about working in groups with people, if how big do you want that group to be before you start to lose your connection with everybody in the group? And to be honest, I like even smaller. I like 3. But if if this is an incident you want to try and maximize that as much as you can without making it too your horizontal. So having one person in managing 12, it gets out of hand. But then also one person managing 3, you might not be very efficient, and your organization is going to be very vertical. So there's going to be like 10 layers from the bottom to get something up to the top person. So it's to try and get a well-balanced organization in the command structure so that you don't have too many layers, but you also don't overburden the managers. I think most of you got this one. So which one is unethical?
Yeah, it says
So-
in the regulations that you can't be biased. That's gender, religions.
So let's go one by one. So consultant wrote a safety audit report, and if you say, I'm not totally sure about this in a report, is that okay? Yeah, if you're not so sure, then I would say, yeah, put that. Don't say 100% confident that you're okay. Okay, if you write a letter to the editor criticizing OSHA or somebody, is that unethical? No, that's okay. I mean, you can dislike OSHA. That's okay.
The first time I read that one, I took it to mean that he increased his profits by 50% by taking money.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So if you increase your rates, is that unethical? No, you can do that. So you should not discriminate based on the nature of the organization. If you don't have time, then you don't have time. That's fine, but don't discriminate.
Always use the phrase like, I don't have time. My schedule's too busy.
um,
I don't know. Isn't it kind of national precedent that you're allowed to, as long
so
it doesn't mean it's right.
it's not against the law.
Okay.
It's against their code of ethics.
Ethics. Okay, that makes sense.
Even like the law, that's where the whole.
Well, yeah, this is it is kind of gray. Yeah, it is.
They found out, if you don't get to the nitty gritty of that, those people went out looking for it.
Yeah.
And that's what made the court case invaluable. But
Right.
the overall precedent was, if somebody comes in and says, I'm gay, I want to hire you for cake, you can't respond with, I don't serve gay. That's where you go.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, in terms of the law, yeah.
No, I'm serious. Like, it's all about work.
No. Well, I mean, I guess regardless of whatever the law says, don't discriminate, right?
No.
I don't want to. It is kind of gray. There's some gray there, but in terms of the law, but ethically, don't discriminate.
Somebody does have that inherent discriminatory nature, though. Are they supposed to? Like, would we rather them consult for somebody and not be biased? And be biased, knowing that they're going to be biased going in?
So I'm not sure I understand your
feel
question.
Like if I know, I'm not saying that I have problems, but if I know that I have a problem with people with blonde hair or something like that, and I know I can't be impartial, I feel like I'd rather remove myself than do a job that I know that I'm not going to do correctly.
Yeah. Yes. So, but
It doesn't make it right that I don't like people with blonde hair, but you know.
yeah, I mean, and if you were in a large, I mean, I can see both sides to that argument. I mean, if you were in the Phoenix area and there are lots of consultants around and you have lots to do and you know that about someone who approaches you ahead of time, then, I mean, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I guess use your own judgment, but I guess I don't have a good answer. But I mean, if
Or if they want you to work on Saturdays if you're Jewish.
well, there you go. I mean, so I try not to work on. Well, I usually don't work on Sunday unless I have to. But so I mean, for yourself, that's that's one thing. But if it's because of someone else's belief or characteristics, then it's a little bit different. But anyway, you just use your own judgment. But I would err on the side of being what BCSP deems ethical. I would err on that side. Every situation is going to be different. Okay, so what is not considered a leading indicator? So this is a leading indicator. This is a leading indicator. This is a leading indicator. So it's this one. Indirect costs of the injury are lagging. The bad thing already happened. Somebody already got hurt. So that's lagging. Quality control, which is that? Nine 9001. ISO 9001. Okay, this is the other one that most people missed, and I haven't thrown out yet.
I think the only thing when I looked at this, and I didn't have time to really work it out because I was.
It is more of a 2 or 3 minute question.
Was that we mixed the two systems together. All the time we were talking, there were two similar systems.
Well, in the review I had, it was like this, but these two were ands and this was an or.
Right.
In the review.
At the bottom, we mixed, still coming up the end, we're mixing the and and or together. So at the end, am I multiplying them together or adding them together?
So once you've combined these two for each of these, then these are irrelevant, and it's only this gate that you worry about.
So
The top.
That's the determining factor of what I'm going to.
Yeah.
I think I kind of missed that one. I didn't really get to finish it. It was like I'm just grabbing my number right now, and I didn't have time because I literally had 1 minute left on the test, and it was my last thing that I came back to because I had the two bottom numbers done.
Mm-hmm.
But then when I was there, I wasn't sure which way direction, and I was looking at the time, and I'm like,
yeah.
Before I spend any more time.
Yeah, and if I came to a problem like this on the actual exam, I might flag it, and I'll come back to it later. I know you can't flag them in Canvas, or can you?
Yeah, you can.
You can.
You just click that one.
I would flag it and then come back later. So if I have a bunch of extra time, then I'll go back, and if not, if I don't, then I'll just pick something and move. But so just real brief overview without spending too much time on this one. So for the AND gate, with our probabilities of failure, is the resulting probability for this entire subsystem going to be higher or lower than either of these numbers? It's an AND gate, so that means it's in parallel, designed in parallel. So the probability of failure should be lower because this and this have to occur, and then we'll get failure. So it's like, if you want to think of a really simple analogy, there's a probability that your captain will have a heart attack and your co-pilot will have a heart attack. So for both to have a heart attack, the probability of that happening is much lower than one or the other. And so we just multiply these two together. So that one's easy. That's the easiest one. Multiply those together and we'll get a single number. Don't worry about that anymore. Over here, what we have to do is first convert these to probabilities of success, then multiply them together. So we do 1 minus that, get those two numbers, multiply them. And now we have the probability of success for this subsystem, but we want failure. So we do 1 minus that value. and we get what this is. And then we do the same thing up here with the two numbers that we've combined. It's an OR, so we have to do the same thing. Find the success, multiply the successes together, and then subtract that from 1. If you take system safety, then you could come back and you can teach me some things that I don't know about fault trees, because you'll understand them a lot more. I threw this one out. I again wrote memorization. I am not a fan of, and so I threw that one out. I threw this one out. So Raynaud's syndrome. What I tell. I can't remember if this is a recorded lecture, but when I have time to talk about ergonomics, I talk about micro trauma. So if my job requires me to slap the table, I get a little tingly because it kind of hurts. Not too bad. That wasn't too hard, but if my job requires me to slap the table, I've just done micro trauma to the tissues in my hand. Now, if I just do that, and that's it. I mean, maybe in an hour, maybe, I don't know, by tomorrow morning, but my hand will have repaired itself. It'll heal up. It'll be fine. But if my job is to think of like a jackhammer, if my job is to do this, and I'm doing that for 3 hours a day, I'm doing lots of micro trauma to those soft tissues in my hand. And they're not really getting a chance to repair themselves. So, however long it takes, for those to heal, I don't know. But let's say by the time I come back on my shift tomorrow, they're still not healed. They're still damaged. And then I start doing it again and repeat. Think of someone who uses a jackhammer. So what happens is you do so much damage to the capillaries in your fingers that they don't work anymore. So blood is not oxygenating these tissues. Your fingers, the ends of your fingers turn white, and you might lose them. So it's a serious thing. But so that would be cold temperatures and vibration for Raynaud's syndrome. Again, kind of a toxicology question, and I don't like memorizations, right? And this is unit conversion. We didn't talk about this specifically, and I threw it out. Oh, we can see here, right? The ones that I've thrown out. So that's worth 0 points. This one is also 0 points, the Z table. So if you got it right, then you get, you get the points, even though, it's worth 0. So for this one, I think, I guess most of you got it. This would be an interlock. These are things you can do to prevent someone from being struck, but we're assuming this is an operation, so locking it out isn't really helpful. A standby observer is great, but it's not the most effective. A presence sensing device is better, but if you're interlocked and you have a railing, you have a physical barrier, that is better. Oh, another tip for standardized exams. Not always, but more often than not, the longest option is the right answer. Just saying. Most of you missed this one, so I removed it. So once you find, you'd have to do some conversions here with these values in here. Once you have found it, you'd have to take the inverse to get the resistance, or what is expected current. Then you'd also have to use Ohm's law. Yeah.
There's like 20 in that. There's 75K. What is the difference?
Mega ohms and kilo ohms. Is that the Yeah. Yeah. It's
I just saw the.
yeah, you have to convert those two. Yeah. So
All the same.
yeah. Yeah. I think a clearer, more clearly worded question would probably help that.
3 different ohms going on.
Yeah. Yeah. So you have to do some conversions. And then you have to use another equation. That's simple, but it's not on there. Anyway, I threw that out. The lifting index, I think everyone got this one. Pretty straightforward. This one is one that hold on a second. Not what I want. So actually, I think it was fault tree and this one. Let me go up to the fault protection question here. I just want to be sure. And also just not to make excuses, but my 2-year-old is sick right now. And I think I told you when he wakes up at night, he wants me. He doesn't go to his mom. And so yeah, while he's sick, it's been like 3 or 4 times a night I get up. And you start to forget things or like lose track of things more easily than usual. I'm not saying I usually keep track of everything. Okay. So I can't remember the proportion of you that got this right, but thinking of the hierarchy of control, without even reading this, which of these is lowest on the hierarchy of controls?
It would be better if it said eliminate toxic properties, but you just reduced the property. You didn't eliminate them.
So this would be an example of substitution, and it's the second highest. So it's probably it is the highest one on here. There's an engineering example, an administrative example, and a personal example. Personal is the lowest.
Lowest is to issue gloves or respirators, since that's the last resort.
So PPE is a last resort. This is an engineering, so you install ventilation system. Rotating people is an administrative control. Not a lot of people, I mean, more missed that one than I thought, but I think it was still a majority got it right. I removed that one. We didn't cover it directly in class. I had mentioned know this, but we didn't cover it.
What is
Splitter?
It is a splitter.
How is a splitter going to prevent kickback?
Because the splitter sits on the back of the blade, and if you don't have the splitter, what will happen is the wood comes back together, and as the blade's coming around, it lifts up the wood, and then causes a kickback.
I was thinking of like the motor brake when it senses tension, it just breaks the.
Mm.
That makes sense.
No, yeah, there is that fancy table saw that
Sensing.
will, yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's all my wood shop stuff. That's what it was. It was the teacher would demonstrate the wood gets thrown in, and then it senses that instant and it just shuts the blade down.
Huh. That's cool. But yeah, so I threw that one out. Most of you got this one, Ohm's law. Which is it? Yep, I equals V divided by R. And maximum use concentration, most of you got this one. And most of you missed this one. I've mentioned it in passing, but as an example of the answer, I went to a professional meeting yesterday in Phoenix, and one of the keynote speakers was talking about data from insurance providers, and the number one category of injuries or cause of injuries in terms of workers' compensation claims was 23% of claims and a lot of money are caused by overexertion. It's super vague, but what do you think that is? No, ergonomics. So these are common, but they're in terms of counts, these are high up there. They could be more than ergonomics, but if a leading cause in both injury counts and days lost, so days lost, I mean, this could be a second probably to ergonomics, but poor ergonomics. It's ergonomics, to be honest, is the biggest cost and the biggest burden to industry in terms of injuries. And that's why it's good, I think, that this program has such a strong focus on it, and you have an expert to teach you those. And I'm not referring to me, to Dr. Fogelman, but questions. So I'm trying to figure out what to put on the screen while we do case studies, because we're not really going to use it. And if you go back and listen to this, then you might want to see something, but it is a big file. So what I'd like you to do is, hey, Fred, I'm glad you made it safe. Get into your teams. So Fred, join a team that doesn't have actually I'm gonna do that, save the light bulb. Get into a team. I'd like the teams to have 3 or less. I don't care how many teams there are, I guess, as long as it's not more than 6. 6 or less. You could form another team if you like. Well, I have another case study that we can use. You can have smaller teams, a team of 2 or 3 if you want. You can break up into 2 teams here. I have another case study. So today is pretty discussion based, and I had thought about changing the tables around so it was easier. We can do that if you want. I don't care. The key for today, the objective is to discuss the case studies, but in the context of management systems and leadership and what to do about, some of these situations that you're going to read about, because that will help you for the exam. If you would like to list ideas out, then I'm going to pass around a whiteboard. And I think at some point I will ask you to use them. Yeah. But go ahead and together read through your case study. And what I'd like you to do first is be able to describe the company, the situation, and the problem. What is the problem? Are you okay? You three are okay. Then I need to get an eraser. This whatever the situation happens to be, tell us a story. The story of your case study, and give us some background and details regarding the problem. It is. Yeah. Yeah.
Obviously, it's been happening over and over and over and over.
And it may not be a single company, and like industry might be more appropriate. Scenario, background. And the problem. It should be on Canvas if you want to have it electronically. And discussion is good when you get to that point. It's fine to talk.
Yeah, it's on. Okay.
I don't see a rule. But I mean, there's nothing else that they suggest, and then they leave it to the employer. Like you were discussing this. Yeah.
It's a topic, right?
Their biggest fix was to eliminate the ladder. That's smart. Well, it's like most paints and stuff now, everything, it's really, really hard to find a oil paint. So, because those are.
Well, they still have the something that are free in the paints. The smell.
Yeah, you're talking the gas off that they introduced. Yeah, most of those are now getting down to really it's all water based, so it's not high.
I remember she was like painting the house and she goes, take me when it comes to you.
Yeah, she
Water. Yeah. The food color.
Yeah, it's a cushion.
I mean, I'm like, yeah, everything was lead and oil based. And it was great. Oh, works really good. Yeah. What's on the grid rates?
Right.
Yeah, that's hard.
One size fits none. They're talking about the meat load. Too difficult for tall employees and too difficult for short ones as well. Employees, after training, not only do they not get it, they get ridiculed for asking. Unsafe working conditions that led to 50% of employees being sick. Injuries caused chopping. Actual pump still. But the union is one of the employees.
different chemicals.
I had it in my possession.
That was great. That was in stereo.
So it's actually now they've added this back.
You issued me with stupid notes, but you just got We're gonna do everything so you can pay us back money.
I guess most of these fires they had were, they probably had ignition sources going in the house. You're always, when you used to use like, you had to shut water, gas stoves, anything with pilot lights. And that's just, then you're shutting down electricity, then you're using like floor sanders or sprayers.
I haven't done it. It's all about ocean regulation. I go here, I assume it's gas trip.
Or maybe before they came out.
Yeah, so, I mean, I was aviation. Safety or aviation hazard.
Yes. Yeah, or tabs, yeah. Yeah. No, we're two. Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
I'm only walking, this is not walking. Yeah, I'm not just starting.
You're such a jerk dog, that.
So,
So, do you person that's there is heavy rail and just more basically all the drivers who said, tell everybody, okay, what kind of company was it, what was the issue? Let's look, kind of stuff.
Yeah, we don't. You're good at, reading what you think is important.
Yeah, it's giving us a lot of information kind of about their background for OSHA standards and like continue reading to find out why they make these standards for non-compliant.
All right. I don't know how much time it's been, but so I like to go through each of your case studies and have you share briefly. So keep your explanation to simple. Try and keep it to a couple minutes ish. I'm not gonna break out the timer, but I don't need a huge explanation. Just kind of set the stage for us. Let us know what your thing is about and what's going on. So first group.
Our industry was floor and finishing.
Okay.
So they're discussing the concept of lacquer and how it catches fire, and the language barrier for training, and the concept of like flammable. So Steve, you want to?
Yeah, some of the problems they're having with the language barriers is that they were using a lot of Vietnamese immigrants as their labor force, and they didn't have English-speaking backgrounds, so all the labels were not effective in promoting fire safety and stuff. And they had 6, 7, 8 incidents over 6-year span of fires being caused while they're refinishing in people's homes because they didn't identify ignition sources or the consequences of using a lacquer-based refinishing product that's highly flammable.
Okay. Thank you. Perfect. All right.
We have a healthcare worker who is a registered nurse. 10 years of lifting and moving patients who were unable to move themselves. She started to have lower back pain and leg pain on one of her days off. She was seen by neurologists, orthopedic surgeons, neurosurgeons, chiropractors. She was diagnosed with degenerative disc disease, lumbar strain, and bulging and herniated discs. She had a number of surgeries, chiropractic appointments, and all of that. She spent years in a battle with the hospital to get workman's comp and also to be permitted to do light duty.
Thank you. Perfect.
All right, so the case study is about a man from Missouri, works for Jasper Popcorn Company. He starts there in '97. He leaves in '99. He works there for 2 years. He ends up getting bronchitis obliterans, something like that.
Bronchiolitis obliterans.
Yeah, that. He ends up having a 24% lung capacity.
Yeesh.
People who get lung transplants only typically live up to 10 years after. He's pretty much doomed. So what happens is NIOSH starts doing studies with rats, and they find out that these rats have the most amount of lung damage that they've ever seen. NIOSH recommends it to OSHA. OSHA has the authority to do something about it. And that's as far as we got. Pretty much, we got about halfway through the case study, and I think there's a settlement in there.
Yeah. You. Over the course of the rest of today, you'll probably finish the rest of it. But that's exactly what I wanted.
What was the positive?
Diacetyl.
Diacetyl.
The title of the
It's-
article was "The Poison That Smells Like Popcorn." So the
Oh,
popcorn companies,
yeah, okay.
they had the butter
fake
stuff,
butter.
but this diacetyl was the poison.
Okay.
So it was a progressive disease.
Okay.
They call it popcorn lung.
Yeah, popcorn lung.
So out of the whole area that they were working in, people who were mixing the chemicals the most obviously were exposed to most.
1,000 times more.
Thank you.
So
You
we
guys.
know the meat and poultry industry, particularly workers who are butchers. Dull knives were a main problem. It was causing workers to have injuries, repetitive use, and when they went to see the doctor, they weren't really having a chance to heal up before they had to go back to work the very next day. You have many ergonomic issues where one size fits none. You have the taller workers who are having to hunch over, and you have the shorter workers who are having to reach higher than they should be. There's a lack of training in the industry overall, and because of that, workers are requesting training from their supervisors, but they're being told no and may even be threatened with reprisal for asking. Generally unsafe conditions. 50% of the employees were either sick or injured. A lot of injuries were common to most. A lot of them are grazing their thumbs to the point where it's no longer really a usable thumb, just kind of a piece of meat hanging off your hand. Unions, of course, help the employees. Laws that came around in the 70s were also helping them, but by the 80s, it was definitely the unions that were coming in because they were trying to go against or even reverse some of these laws. But ultimately, it was automation that saved a lot of this industry because it's removing them from some of these repetitive actions that you don't really need a human to do.
Mm-hmm. I would like to take a tour of a meat packing plant. I think I've mentioned that before, maybe, but I know I might not want to eat hamburger for a while after, but I'm sure I'll come back to hamburger. But anyway, I find it fascinating. They are very dangerous places. And thank you.
Our company is an industry, I guess, construction site. And the study was I got run over by a bulldozer that was coming first. It was wrecked another truck. And another guy had seen it like happening and tried to warn them, but them could hear them. And the problem was that there's like lack of situational awareness with the whole thing. There's a lot going on. Probably a lot of noise that drowned out.
Okay, construction is dangerous. Healthcare is more dangerous than than we like to think as well. Thank you.
So we had a cushion company in North Carolina, and what was happening was that the workers, when they were gluing these foam pieces of cushion together, they were using a methylene chloride adhesive spray, But OSHA released a standard, I think it was 1998 or 1999, saying, okay, we need to lower this exposure a lot. Like this isn't a good chemical to be coming into contact with. So the companies switched to 1-bromopropane adhesive. But when they started using this, their workers started getting sick. And they had a woman who came into the hospital, which she'd been having really bad headaches. Her like joints, like her like arms and back and legs were burning, getting numb, and then she just couldn't even walk anymore. And they found out that it was actually this new adhesive spray they were using with the 1-bromopropane was even worse. I guess it was having effect sooner than the methylene chloride was. So they were trying to meet with OSHA standards, but by switching to a chemical that did meet the limits, they actually made it worse for employees. Though the article went on to say that based on studies, the exposure to the methylene chloride over time would have been just as bad. People would have seen heart disease and other impacts. So really, neither of the chemicals were a good choice. So if you want to.
And some companies, if not just this company, use the 1-bromine, the OSHA standard chemical, and then they found out that it's a neurological illness,
Mm-hmm.
and then it lasted for the prognosis is they did not mention the prognosis, but the lasting effect would have it's been months to years for the
Yeah,
workers.
a lot of these are some of the worst case scenarios. But hold on a second. Let me. Oh, hey. Yeah.
For our case, is it is OSHA trying to just like try to test something which they haven't really done their research, because apparently they use a chemical that kind of like make the people sick faster than the methyl whatever chemical they were using before. So is it kind of
I mean, I guess OSHA didn't have the standards out for that one, so the company could have switched to any other kind of adhesive spray, but the bromopropane one is just the one that goes. And there hadn't been enough test runs. Like it also was talking about in the article, they were starting to like do testing right around the time that the company made the switch was when studies started being done on the bromopropane, and they started finding out, oh, this is actually bad too.
So there are a lot of things to unpack with all the case studies, and I want to. We will talk about some of the broader systems, I guess you could say, sort of national level systems like OSHA. But I also want to focus more on company specific systems, and that I feel like that's where most of you will be, is not on the national stage, at least not yet. Maybe one of you will become I don't know, the director of NIOSH or something someday. But so let's say I'm gonna save your question, and we will. It is. I mean, okay. The short answer is there are 10,000 new chemicals created every year. Who's gonna pay to test all those? Nobody. Nobody does. So we don't know. We use the analogy of the canary in the coal mine. So workers are the canary in the coal mine, and when they start dropping, then we raise our hands and our arms and say, "Oh no, something's wrong." Yeah, oops. We need to do something. There are society level things that probably need to change to address that. I don't want to get too much on that topic, but I want to focus on what can you do if you are the safety coordinator, manager, whatever in an organization. What can you do to protect your people? So as you read and try and answer, not try and answer the next question, what I want you to do is look for failures of the system. identify them, and then talk about things that could maybe fix the system. Now, these case studies, man, they kind of focus on, they kind of take a public health perspective, which, I appreciate being for public health, but it's not always, I don't know if it's always like the appropriate perspective to take. In public health, usually they're thinking like national level. I want you to maybe think a little bit national, but bring it down to an organization. So if you are the safety manager of a company in this industry, what are the failures of the system if this happens to your people? And what can you do with the system to prevent it in the future? And just because it's simpler, I'm going to draw the diagram for at least the one that I'm going to say risk assessment, and then risk control. I mean, there's different verbiage there technically, but you have these two things, and and that is a continual cycle. But then you also have, I'm going to abbreviate, management leadership, and worker participation. Maybe we'll show the pizza video today, if I remember. And then sort of encapsulating this, you have program evaluation. This is kind of a nutshell of what a system would look like. Abbreviated version. Anyway, so take, 5 or 10 minutes to identify as many failures in the system as you can. They don't have to match this exactly, just what are failures, and not of the workers. People, they may have done some dumb stuff. Not in all the cases. I mean, like the popcorn lung, they're just doing their job, and now they have popcorn lung. Like, they didn't know. Nobody knew, to be honest. But what kind of a system could you design, or where could you strengthen in your system to fix that problem? So take 5 or 10 minutes. First, identify the system failures, and then what could be done. And real quick, when I say what could be done, I want you to think of higher than the controls. Zoom out from the controls. So if don't get down into the nitty gritty, oh, we should have put a machine guard on that. Zoom out a little bit. Look at the the system and say, well, how do we figure out what controls to use? I want you to know how to find the right answer. I don't want you to give me the answer, but how would you find out what controls? How would you make all of this work?
The National Toxicology Program did a study in 1986, and they found that, like, there are bad effects of these, like, standards that we should have right now. But That's 1986. This study. And so another 12 years. How much? If I'm mid-70s, yeah. But I mean, that option, say ACCI, yeah, they early on were like, oh, like, it's that affects well, we think that's and then it's just chemical, that's where the saying, oh, like, yeah, it's actually, yeah.
So maybe we should find a way to formulation.
Maximize regulation.
Decrease exposure.
They had a safety manager. I think that, you know, even though it was just,
They hire them.
say it was happening, they might just.
They're noticing the massive impact on
Let's say
Artificial butter. That's what it was.
That's kind of the three points. You know the cheese at McDonald's? They don't want the cheese that they put at McDonald's. It's not cheese.
I was just saying,
Cheese imitation.
something.
So they have no right to call it cheese.
Right.
It's cheese imitation.
And then like money. Yeah. So that was good. Yeah. You know, lower exposure to it, pick a new chemical altogether, just to pick a chemical, maybe do better research into it.
They're great.
Except
They have
something.
Yeah.
objective speaking knowledge.
I mean, if we needed to, but if we could substitute with something else altogether, that would be great.
They have the desire to understand people.
Yeah, in 1997, officially reduced the number of fluoride, and that started using longer propane. But the problem
We could definitely put exploitation of the on there.
So how are you going to see? One of those
yeah, we could be like a CPL 50 research on there. I don't just apply with social standards, great, but you know, actually looking at the chemicals, see if there are any studies.
I didn't know, so he's using parachutes. It's, it's a deck, so it's just a type of. Well, it's like the, like hot things, like walking around the floor, and you get out there with it. It's out there with it.
It's the same thing.
It's out there with the lighter. It's like doing, you know, sex wax on the board, you know? I just. That makes a little bit, yeah. I would recommend it, I would use something like, blood.
So despite some
Then
signals
but
of
most of them aren't, they're all water-based, so.
no comprehensive testing.
No water-based.
However, a broader literature has expanded compared to 1998. So OSHA implemented fluoride in 1997. So that's what it is. 1 year after this they started studies started coming out about that. And I think Arnold in 2003 that she was brought on.
So it's just how, it just lets it, how far you can do it and how quickly.
Considering that it wasn't saying like,
It doesn't actually need better or worse.
well, so I'm talking about the one form of propane that they switched to in 1997. So in 1981, there were some photo signals, but I don't think that's something that safety officers would have found because the study didn't do it until 1998. And if this is for 2000, 2 years is a long time where we would have been able to like, oh look, he's not checking. Is a new study out today? Is a new study out today? So honestly, that's hard. I mean, maybe we could have done better research when we made the switch to see if there was something better than one.
It's so efficient. Better.
Yeah. No, so there should have been
The automation.
Well, they already had standards for that one. But they changed the standards for the medical device. So then the company was like, okay, well, we can use. And that was probably like the easiest one. I'm not sure. 1997 is when the standards were done. So yeah.
Okay.
Firewall.
Okay, but
We're done.
okay. So when they use that after 3 years, this started.
Yeah. Yeah. Which that's why I was saying, you know, that's not a lot of time.
But it's still used.
So it can be posted.
Yeah.
Because in 3 years.
Yeah, they were seeing studies.
Right.
So.
And it's a neurological illness too, so. Do they stop?
So another 30 seconds.
But you cannot actually. You cannot. And you would trust them that okay, this is safe.
Right, but we have to come up with ways that the safety officer can do something better, so that's what I'm saying.
Basically nothing.
Yeah, the only thing they could have done for the second chemical was when they were making the switch from ethylene and chloride, maybe done some more research onto what they might have seen, oh, there's a possibility that this chemical could have an effect. However, just about any chemical could have an effect if people are exposed.
All right, so first team, what was wrong? What went wrong in the system?
Well, some of the, and I don't know so much as the system, but it's the language barrier is the issue. And they spent more time just reinforcing the language protocol that already existed and leaves it up to the employer to change the add subcategories of language. So to speak. So, you know, instead of having English and Spanish on the label, you know, in this case it's Vietnamese. Well, we were talking like you can't have 150 languages on the label to accommodate everybody. So then you probably just end up putting it to the lowest level to address that. Theirs was another fix or item. They say the problem is it's not a regulated industry. In other words, it's not, you don't have to be licensed or contracted. That was the idea to bring that into the fold of the industry and make it regulated.
Okay, so you've got some broad level and then a little bit, you know, company level there.
One of the fixes was they just stopped using the
Yeah, as of 2010, they ceased to use flammable lacquers. So they engineered the problem, and now it's all water-based.
So go and wrap up your conversations.
Right, but there was.
So, so you can continue in a little bit. So everyone's case is different, and for some of these, it's hard to anticipate. What I want to focus our discussion on is how I want you to think of the system as like a machine. So it's like you're designing a machine that will catch problems and find a solution and implement it. And there will be stuff that you can't anticipate. So we try to anticipate, but there may be some people who get burned, you know, or even die using the lacquer. How can we design a system that maybe catches that before that happens, or when we see signs, you know, troubling signs? And so your situation is pretty interesting. So these Vietnamese workers don't speak English, right? So on a and you mentioned some of the challenges on a like a national level. You can't put every language on the label, right? So now with GHS, at least maybe it's a little bit more visual, but I'm not sure if the same scenario were repeated now with a GHS label, if the outcome would be any different.
Probably not.
I think that comes down to worker training as well. Because sometimes people, you're using a lacquer, that's great, but it could be in the back and then somebody's walking out that already in the unit they're buying into and thinking.
Good. So we haven't talked about this in depth, but maybe now we're talking specific controls. So substitution here, also chemical inventory and management. When you select the material, maybe someone from safety should be involved in that process. So if purchasing or operations or production or whoever selects the material, how are they going to grade the material? I mean, they'll do it differently. If this is purchasing, they'll grade it differently than if it's operations or production versus if it's safety. What is purchasing going to be looking for?
Cost.
The cheapest one, right? Or most cost effective. What is production going to be looking for?
Easy use.
Right, the one that works the best. And then what is safety going to be looking for?
The safest one.
Right.
What's the most dangerous thing?
Right. So everyone kind of has to be involved in that decision, to be honest.
But like a thing for, as far as we're concerned, it's lacquer. In all honesty, the owner is the safety and the purchaser. They're
Right.
the instructor.
These are
And,
mom and pop, low, less than 10 or 15 employee kind of jobs with one person running the show.
That is a good point. I guess I imagine this is a little bit larger, large enough to have a safety person.
Okay, we'll call it a national flooring company. That has. Now, if this was a bigger company, with all the bells and whistles, then you would ideally have somebody that, it'd be a group conference on when you purchase stuff. If we want to use a new product, then we're all going to sit down and list our objectives, list what the problems and the pros and cons of using anything, and then it'll be disseminated, and then it'll be a training program that'll design how to use the programs, the hazards, the PPE if it's required, or in this case, you can just engineer it out, and there's not going to be a hazard anymore.
You need to make pizza to keep it away.
Yeah, or donuts.
Like Subway.
So basically, there should be a process involved in this, and multiple people are going to have to be involved. So we'll stop right there for you guys, and we'll come back to it. All right.
Yes. The risk assessment. Where we should start.
So, well, definitely. Tell me what. Let's start with management leadership, though.
Okay. Failure to understand or acknowledge the fact that the healthcare workers are vulnerable to back injuries.
So
repetitive actions.
So it sounded like management wasn't showing a lot of commitment to safety. You were saying she had to sue the hospital. Is that right? To get compensation.
She had to go through a long battle through. I don't think it was the hospital. I think it was through workman's comp itself.
So maybe an insurance provider,
Okay.
but I think it would be the company itself.
Okay.
I mean, but
They didn't motivate them to speak out when they're injured or anything. So.
Okay, so what are some things an organization could do to show commitment to safety and to lead in safety in this situation?
So we have I'd like to get the workers to do training towards creating lift teams, zero lift policies, using resources that are available, like mechanical resources.
Okay, so allocating resources and time to safety. Okay, good. Good. So what now you also mentioned, I mean, I think things kind of start here. It kind of really starts. It's you got to have management leadership and commitment to make everything work well. You can still limp along without it, but which a lot of companies do. but it's important to get commitment from the top and in management. What could be done to involve workers in this scenario?
Involving them in the process, asking them what they think would help.
Okay, so what would that look like maybe?
Safety committee.
Okay, so have a safety committee with some nurses on it. Okay, good. What might the committee do? Just some general things.
Help them avoid injuries, inform workers, and get input.
Okay, and so one thing with everyone's scenario, I mean, it's kind of across the board, but I'm like you, and when I think about fixing something, I think of the specific controls, like, oh, we need it, oh, people are being exposed to that, let's install ventilation. Oh, let's substitute a different chemical. Sometimes, well, what I want you to think of is a case where you've got to design a system so that even if, say, you're gone that day, the system can identify the control and what to do. The system will figure out the solution. When I say system, I mean, obviously there are people involved in that, but so maybe you're talking about those training programs. Maybe the safety committee is involved in identifying potential controls, talking with workers from the different departments, and figuring out some things that they might want to pilot, they might want to test out and see, does this make a difference? Good. And you had mentioned risk assessment. What did you mean by that?
Well, I just meant that's something, I feel like that's something they should start out with. Like to see where they're at.
Yeah.
And then go from there to make sure that they're working towards their goal of not having that happen.
So for the next, I mean, with your answer to this question, I want you to imagine that you are the new safety manager at a hospital. How do you identify what that baseline is of where you're at? Where's the company at? What do you do?
I'm looking to past workers' comp stuff, past complaints.
Okay, good. So you are going to look to the past, figure out historically leading and lagging indicators to figure out where you're sort of trending, and so that you can set some goals and decide what improvement looks like. Yeah, definitely. Good.
Ours was on the issue of the artificial popcorn flavoring.
Yeah.
And so some of the things, it was like a big political battle because you had the workers and the unions were getting involved, recognizing that there was a problem with this diacetyl. And then nobody wanted to touch it. OSHA wanted to get involved. The Department of Labor didn't. Then we had the solicitors get involved, and they said we can't do it. And there was,
Wait, what was OSHA's relationship to the Department of Labor?
they work under
Yeah, they are in the Department of Labor. So OSHA wanted to, but their boss basically said no.
yeah, so they wanted to has the authority to issue what they call an emergency temporary standard for the general duty clause, where each employer has a right or the responsibility to ensure their employees have a safe environment. And so then OSHA's legal advisors within the Department of Labor weren't interested in having that used, so they denied the petition for the general duty clause. And then the unions got involved, the United Food and Commercial Workers Union and the Teamsters. And then in 2002, the OSHA Popcorn Board.
Wow.
So they had an alliance, and then the next year it ended, and they had no reason for that. And then in 2006, they got together, or they did legal action, and then this sentence here kind of sums up what was going on. It says, one legal analyst wrote, in the face of regulatory paralysis and scientific uncertainty came trial lawyers. So then it just got locked up in the courts and workers suffered. That was kind of the whole story.
So
even one guy that was he worked weekends, Friday and Saturday nights, in a theater for so many years, and he processed 10 or 15 bags of microwave popcorn, put it into a dispenser, and he was exposed to this stuff. So that's the background.
And I've heard of a guy who ate microwavable popcorn 3 times a day for 10 years, and he developed popcorn lung. Anyway, so it's not just, you know, in the workplace, but you know, I don't know how many people eat that much popcorn. No, but that's a lot of popcorn. But
it's not the microwave; it's the artificial butter flavor.
Right. Well,
diacetyl.
so by heating it up and then opening the bag, and you know, there's a nice, you know, nice buttery smell as he's eating it. Anyway, so he was exposing himself. But so I do want to. We'll zoom out with your case study a little bit. Oh, okay. You have
the risk stuff. So basically, my first solution is remove diacetyl and see if we can find a substitute instead. So maybe a safer product. Second thing is we can do training for these individuals that work. Then I want to do a study, find out how much diacetyl is actually in the mixing area and in the whole plant. And then if we have to, we'll get the proper PP, the proper mask for it. And then on top of that, I'm going to add another layer. I want to limit the exposure time. So, and good ventilation. So it would, in the mixing area, there would be a separate room. I'd want ventilation, and I would want to do, limit the exposure time. That's what I would do.
good. So I guess as a I harp on PPE, but sometimes, I mean, it has its place and its use, and in a case like this where everyone's freaking out and NIOSH is starting to do all these studies and they're trying to figure out what the heck is going on. You know, why do these workers have 24% of their lung capacity? In the interim, maybe you do use respirators until you figure out what's going on. But I guess just as a little bit of context, so the solution at the end of this, I haven't read through all of 100% of each case study, but so I don't know if it's in there. But the solution was to cover the vats. So they had these big, huge vats of the butter flavoring, you know, cooking or whatever, and they covered it, and that was it. Sometimes it's that easy, but those are all ideas that are relevant and good for an airborne exposure. And yeah, so in the meantime, while you're trying to figure out what to do, you put everybody in respirators, you know, and find. I mean, that's one that's fairly quick to roll out, but you know, some of the others might take more time. I want to just well, maybe I'll save it actually for the end when we're done with everyone's case studies, to talk about OSHA a little bit. but you as the safety manager, professional, whatever, won't be able to anticipate everything that's going to happen, all the hazards. And some of the hazards that you guys have, like nobody anticipated. But how could you organize your workplace, your workers, your organization management system to be able? It's got to be adaptable enough that if something comes up, you can adjust to protect people. But it's also the process has to be robust enough that you don't rush to pick a substitute that ends up being worse than the original situation.
If it causes death, why would you eat it? And shouldn't they just stop?
Well,
Like
offering that?
if you watch commercials on TV for prescription drugs, they'll list the after effects, and some of them are even including death. But yet people keep taking it.
Well, so one thing about drugs, do you know why they list? Tell me if I've told you this before. Why do they list out all of those symptoms at the end of the commercial?
Because it had to happen only once.
So, well, so legal, but I'm not sure they have to list everything that they do. But especially like the little stuff, like maybe they don't have to do that, but because they list everything, you start to just tune it out because you're like, oh, it causes a bunch of stuff, so like, da 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 da, headache, da da, death, da da, and you're like, after a while, people stop paying attention. Once they hear that's part of the commercial, then they tune it out because they know, okay, here comes a list of a bunch of symptoms. I don't care. Does it make me feel good? But anyway, so I guess for yours, it's hard to anticipate something like popcorn lung, but you want to think about how you design a system, what components it would have to catch those hot potatoes, whatever you want to, the hazards, identify them hopefully early on, and then figure out a way to fix it, to control it. So the system does that, and not always, you, because at some point you're going to get a nice job offer and you're going to leave the company. And, if you were like the rock star and everything depended on you, though, then, they're going to be in trouble.
Some of those e-cigarettes have that.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah.
It's a primary chemical component of one of them.
Wow.
Yeah.
So this generation of the e-cig smokers, they're the test dummies.
Yeah. When that first started, everybody's like, oh, it's great. Who cares? It's not, it's just air and water.
Raise your hand if you're an e-smoker.
Wow. We don't need to.
Sorry, I just.
Yeah.
People do it because they think it's good for them. They
Yeah.
don't care.
Yeah. See.
They
So.
don't need lectures
You
on
might
it.
as well smoke a cigarette.
So I do want to bring up. So OSHA has education and training as like one of their key parts, and I consider it's like part of this. It doesn't deserve its own category, and that's a good point. So smoking is a good example, or any high risk activity. People generally know, not always, but generally know they choose to assume the risk. They know that there's risk and they choose to assume it. And education will whittle out some people who don't like to assume that risk, and suddenly, oh, wow, it does that. Okay, I'm not going to do it. So it's only so effective. Plus, if you have a lot of turnover at your organization, you spent all these hours training people and then they leave and you hire someone new. You got to spend all those hours training them again. So you want to, now education and training is necessary. I'm not saying it's not important. It is important. It's a key control, but you don't want to rely on it because again, you're still there are a lot of things involved with that rely on humans. Is the trainer very effective? Maybe not. Are people actually learning? Are they becoming competent? If it's lecture based death by PowerPoint, they're probably not super competent in what they're being trained on. So you need it, but try to design your system and your controls to minimize your reliance on humans and maximize, what is automatic.
Are you proposing we be taught by robots?
No. What I'm saying is, if now there are some cases where like it's hard to minimize how much education and training is required. But okay, let's go to smoking again, for example. So everyone knows now that smoking is bad for your health, and some people still choose to do it.
Unless
It's
a
human
Cuban
behavior.
cigar, then it's good.
I don't know, but so education and training is going to whittle out some of that. But if you could think of it in terms of safety as well, education and training is going to prevent some risks, but not all of them. And some people still choose to assume risk. And then some things are not dependent on people, and it's just out of their control. You want to design other measures to help. So in the case of smoking, there's not an engineering control I can talk about, but there are lots of administrative ones. So what are some laws that have been passed in the last 20 years to reduce the convenience of smoking?
Taxes.
Okay, it's less convenient if it's really expensive.
Age requirement.
Okay, so yeah, that
Smoke in front of the building. Yeah, I think it has to be 20 feet now.
so yeah,
Or in
Yep.
some cases, not at all.
yeah.
In
Can't
Japan,
do it in restaurants anymore.
they have like separate little container rooms outside. They're like greenhouses. And you have to go in there and smoke.
Wow, that's cool. I didn't know that, but so there are lots of law policy. I mean, these are all administrative controls, but pass policies that make it less convenient, and then fewer and fewer and fewer people will bypass. It's less convenient. It's you gotta jump over more hurdles to do it, and so fewer and fewer people do. But you'll never, as long as humans are involved, then it'll never reach zero. That's well, anyway. Controls that involve humans are less reliable, less effective than controls that don't involve humans. That takes the human out and just prevents it completely. Or finding a substitute. All right, that's enough on that one. You guys.
Case study is about basically the meat and like butchering industry, like meat packaging, slaughtering animal and stuff. So yeah, if like you said, if you were to compare it with like a machine, this would be a very broken machine because I don't think there's even a system in the first place. Because for example, like they don't care about the equipment condition. There's no training. If you ask for it, you sometimes could get fired. For training and all that stuff, you can't even take time out of work if you chop your hand off or something. So I guess.
So there's not very much commitment from
So
from
the
leadership.
first place to start is to implement that management, proper like leadership and all that stuff. Like so that they would come up with a way or a system to, start making this better. For example, like, implement training. That's the first thing. Like, you just have to not get fired for asking for training. And like come out with something like maybe a department that take care of like the equipment. Like, like he was mentioning that they were like using the knife so much that it's basically to the point where the it just doesn't cut anymore because you use it so much. So, you know, some simple thing like just have a two lot of like knife and then you rotate them out so that, you know, those one that basically used to like, you know, to the limit can just go out, resharpen it, while the other one was being used, just rotate them out like that. But like, you know, for example, the floor, because there's so much like liquid from, you know, slaughtering like blood, like this fat, this like chunk of unwanted like parts, and, like the meat and stuff. So maybe design a floor or like give a better boot so that you won't slip and stuff. Like the floor could just be like, you know, like a drain hole where like all the blood, all the meat go down, but you can still walk on it, not just like a flat floor like that. And also, I think OSHA mentioned in this that they don't have enough data because people were not reporting injuries in the prom. And why? It's because these companies like to employ undocumented immigrants to work on it because, you know, legal citizens, they don't want to work this kind of job because it's just not, you know, it's just not safe for how much they're getting paid. And the company likes to, you know, employ like undocumented people because why would you pay more when you can pay less and get the same job done? So, and of course they're not going to report it because the company would get in trouble. And even worse is the worker doesn't even want to report it too, because if they report, then they would get other people involved, and now they're going to get fined out that they're working illegally. So, yeah.
So you made me think of a little bit of an analogy with the reporting and data. Data is kind of like a feedback sensor. Sort of, I mean, if you think of like flying, imagine flying, you know, with no instruments. Imagine flying with blind. You know, if you have no data and you haven't been looking at your data regarding safety, you are blind. Like you are flying blind, and just sounds, you know, you can imagine pretty haphazardly just getting the job done and not worrying about the collateral damage. So yeah, it definitely, and I think a lot of the controls that you could identify will come through the workers themselves. Now, sometimes workers have ideas that aren't, you know, feasible or effective. They might suggest some things, you know, and that's where a safety professional would be there to kind of filter out the bad ones, but pick the good ones. But yeah, so, you know, having a safety committee and management being open to their suggestions would go a long way. And then assessing risks and collecting data to be able to, you know, have some feedback and see how you're doing.
Yeah, like the thing is, I wonder if they don't implement all that in the first place because they know that they don't need one. You know, like something happened, they don't need to report it, and they know no one's gonna speak up because if those people speak up, you know, they get in trouble, they get deported and all that stuff. So like, you know, why would maybe the company just like, we don't even need one in the first place. Like, why would we spend time and resources in that when, you know, no one ever gonna find out? You know, if something happened, if he can't work anymore, just get someone else.
Yeah. I mean, every organization is within a larger system, and there is no negative feedback on the organization when something bad happens to say, stop doing that. But and we'll talk more about the broader level, I think, at the end. Shoot, what was I going to say? So this is what I believe. And I believe this is true most of the time, probably 95% of the time, but that quote, that safety and productivity share the same sire, competent management. If management is competent, then, so it's not that safety necessarily will lead to better production. Maybe it will, maybe it won't, I don't know. but that competent management will lead to both better safety and production. And so, you know, I think management is a big part of that. Get more competent management and you'll see productivity increase and safety improve, I think.
So, are just the construction driving over part of that bulldozer? Failures in the system or a lack of safety culture, especially with the management, because the guy who's actually driving the bulldozer with the owner company. So, like, hopefully, they want to service safety, all that, and like, service situational awareness, being aware of where he was driving, worker being aware of where he was walking.
Yeah, fix the system. I think there must be a second party that operates the safety and enforce it in the construction site, because the company's owner, he is the one that will drive the bulldozer. So the worker won't say no, so that he will not lose the money or something like this. So there must be something over the boss that says yes or no for things. And also, this second party should evaluate this company. So if they need a new job or something, that will affect their reputation system. And also, absence of technology, also different. Construction, like there is no need for cameras or something, because they need to look at the roofs or something like this. But there must be a source of sensors next to the edge zone of construction. These are the most important.
So those are good. One of the things the authors of the case studies talk about with this one is prevention through design. Has anyone heard that term? So NIOSH has an initiative, I guess you could say, for prevention through design, not just for construction, for all industries. In the design phase, keeping safety in mind. Has anyone ever, I mean, I guess this is more ergonomics, but ever ridden in or driven a really old vehicle? I mean, you know, I don't know, 70s, 80s. Some of you definitely, but from the 40s, okay. If you come, so I describe the old vehicles a little bit, okay, or an old airplane.
No seatbelt.
Okay, no seatbelts.
No shoulder harness. That's not.
Okay.
No airbag.
What about the just inside the cabin itself? It's not very comfortable, right? It's like there's probably a metal sheet and then a little bit of cushion below that or something. You know, I don't know, or a wooden. I don't know if it was wood or metal, but anyway, not comfortable, right? Was not designed with humans really in mind. I mean, generally, someone could sit in there, but yeah. But more and more, you do see in the design phase, at least ergonomics. You know, ergonomics is really, I mean, industrial designers really consider that when they design things. I have heard that some. I mean, there's some car brands that are super comfortable. I haven't had the chance to sit in them yet, but and that I've heard from people who have driven in these that it's almost like night and day, even with modern vehicles. Just the comfort level. Anyway, we're talking about comfort, but it's also with ergonomics. More and more, you'll see with tools, the worker that they had the worker in mind, the user. I think that actually stems a little bit from a shift to where the user is the purchaser and not some purchasing department. No, I mean, in organizations, it's not always like that. But if you think about it, think of computers like 20 years ago. Who was going to buy the computer in a company? Who, if in a large company, who would buy the computer? Not the user. Like the IT department is going to buy the computer. So they're going to look at the spec sheets, compare the numbers on the computers, and pick the best computer. But then when the user gets it, and it's not very user friendly, and like you have to have a big manual to figure out how to just do basic stuff. You know, there was no thought of the user, right? Of the human experience, the user experience. But that is something that I think is changing. And changing culture at a construction company or any company is a hard thing. That is hard. Any thoughts from anybody on just how do you change the culture of a company? So you could think of, I think I shared this. Did I share the path versus the freeway example? No, dang it. I should, but like a path through the forest, I didn't share that one. So, okay. So imagine, so I like to go up on Mingus Mountain because it's not too far from my house. But anyway, let's suppose, has anyone else been up on Mingus Mountain? A few people? Okay. Let's suppose there were no existing trails and you needed to get from the pass where the highway peaks and then goes down to Jerome. From the pass to Mingus Mountain. Let's say there's no road either. I just say, you say, Rustin, get from here to the peak. Do you think I'm going to pick the most efficient route the first time? No, no. I mean, I'll wander around through the woods and I'll figure out how to get to the peak.
You may not even be in an area that is even convenient.
Yeah. But think of this in the context of a company that's just a startup, just barely, freshly minted as an LLC or whatever, or a corporation. And they have like a team of 5 people. And it's like, and they've got to get from their company from A to B. And so think of, that's like my path from A to B, the peak of Mingus Mountain. If you put me up there again and say, okay, do it again, I might not follow exactly the same path, but I'm going to kind of stay similar, in similar areas, and I'll figure out how to get up there and maybe a little bit faster, and put me up again and again and again and again and again. And eventually it might not be the most efficient path, but I'll start to wear a path. I'll pick a path that I always follow, and it'll start to wear, a footpath into the side of the mountain. And eventually that's how I'll get from the pass to the peak. So in a company, when their culture is being it just like was birthed and it's being formed as it does things, when they try to, they're going to figure out how to survive and start to grow and get from A to B.
So you look at different companies with similar dynamics, see what worked and didn't work for them.
Okay, so they're learning, but over time they're going to start to see, okay, like we've done this in the past and it worked. It got us from A to B, so we're going to do that. This is as it ages, as the company ages and over time. So that footpath goes from a little footpath to like a dirt road, and then a dirt road to a paved highway, and then a paved highway to like an 8-lane. So think of the huge tech companies, think of Microsoft, Apple, whoever. Once they are old, they're not very flexible anymore. So it's kind of like an oak tree too, when it's young, it's flexible and you could point it and it would grow different directions. Once that oak tree is old, it's set. It's like the 8-lane freeway. How feasible is it to change how you get from A to B now that you have an 8-lane freeway? It's not. Or it's like the oak tree. The oak tree is this way. Well, it turns out now we got to move it this way, guys. Well, it's not. It's probably going to break if you do it. And that, unfortunately, for a lot of organizations, That's what it takes, is a crisis for them to change the culture. Unfortunately, changing culture is really, really hard because you have to change people and how they interact and all that. And it's really soft and squishy, and not, you can't make a formula that just changes it. So that's my analogy. How do you think you go about that, though? I mean, how do you start?
Is it a big business or a small business?
Let's say medium to large.
Medium to large, or just go with the finance?
Okay, well, so that would be the crisis, right?
No, I mean,
Or
it doesn't have to be a crisis. The number one way to inspire culture change, especially in a medium to large business, is to show significant revenue gain. They increase their profitability, and that's going to create this mentality among senior leadership, disseminate the information and require it to be done throughout the ranks because of the cost saving. Otherwise, planting the seed of that idea, change something and push it in a different direction, requires either a large change of management, so you get new and fresh faces in there so they're not all stuck in their ways, or a really persuasive CEO.
yeah. So I agree. I guess we don't have to think so large, but maybe on the sort of crew or department level.
I think you're looking for more of what we're talking about is the inflexibility of change, where we've worn this path, we've done this so many ways, nobody wants to change it.
The military.
Until
Well, the military is the military is a big oak tree that, like,
Small
yeah.
units. Small unit to big.
The little branch is flexible, right? But yeah.
Nope.
Okay, maybe it's not. So
Change in management.
okay, so I think I agree that I think that that you have to start here. And I want you to look at Microsoft as an example. Again, I keep using these tech companies, but who was the CEO before? Got like a cobweb on me. Has anyone ever watched Brian Regan, the comedian? Does anyone know who he is? Maybe I feel I don't know, uncultured or something. You have?
Yeah,
Okay. I guess I'm a nerd. I don't know, but anyway, it's been a while since I've listened to him. But he has this one routine he does. I mean, it's just a little thing where he's like, have you ever seen someone who's like walking on from a distance and they walk into a cobweb? Like if there's a cobweb right there, they don't see it. They're just walking along, and then anyway, I always think of that when I walk into a cobweb. So the CEO before, I think, is, what's his name? Nadell, I think, is the name of Microsoft's current CEO. Does anyone know who the CEO was before him? Dang it. Okay. So Steve Ballmer, has anyone heard of him? So if you have heard of him, raise your hand. Okay, so we have one person. That's good. Who was the CEO before Steve Ballmer? Bill Gates. Yeah. Yep. So there have been 3 CEOs in Microsoft's history. Everyone knows Bill Gates. Steve Ballmer, not so much, but he's interesting. So you know Steve Ballmer? I mean, you. Okay. All right.
I couldn't speak to any.
Okay. So Bill Gates was there at the beginning, like startup. They're the little sapling, the little footpath. Copy Apple. Just kidding. Figure out how to do, get things going. I'm just kidding on that. I don't really know, and I don't really care. But anyway, they figured out how to create this giant company. So Bill Gates was kind of on the ascent. Steve Ballmer came in. I mean, they still make lots of money. Lots of companies would like to have the revenues and profits that they do, but I guess their trajectory is kind of, right. And they're kind of on the the rate of growth is slowing, and right, they've matured. Steve Ballmer was in here somewhere after the rocket took off, and he was with Bill Gates when the company was a startup, and they figured out these things. Okay, doing A to B makes us money. Talking about money makes money, so let's do that. So Steve Ballmer was very set on the whole Windows idea. Windows. If you ever have free time and just want to see a nerd being a nerd and get a kick out of it, watch a Steve Ballmer keynote or whatever. He is not a Steve Jobs in terms of presentation, and but anyway, it's funny to kind of contrast the two, but he had this Windows mindset, that's what used to work. And he was so fixed on that everything they bought Nokia. They they tried to squeeze Windows, like on a phone. It was all about Windows, but everything else around them had changed, and they needed to kind of adapt. They needed a culture change. They needed a change of focus. But he was so fixed on that he he couldn't see it. And anyway, after they bought Nokia and then lost like $1 billion, he stepped down, and Nadell came in. So Nadell is an example, I think, of smart but slow. It's slow culture change in a company like Microsoft. So he knew Windows needed to be demoted, but for the Microsoft culture and everything, everyone else was kind of like Steve Ballmer, oh, it's all about Windows. But he could tell we need to kind of tuck this back here and focus on something new. So what he did was, now I don't know why I'm sharing this story, but Windows used to be integrated in this other unit within Microsoft, and I wish I knew all these details. He knew that Windows was losing money, but he didn't want to be the one to say, "Hey, we need to tuck Windows back here and focus on other things." So what he did is he made an organizational change, and he broke Windows away from this other unit so that they could see the numbers, each one separately. And after the first quarter, then everyone was like, "Oh, we need to move Windows down." Anyway, it's kind of like Inception. Yeah. So this relates to the NASA case study for the exam. This culture change thing, and with management. So it could be that you as management or whoever has a great idea on how you're going to get your company from A to B, or how you're going to get your safety culture from A to B, or fix this problem, anything. You have an awesome idea on for a solution. Again, so remember this for the NASA case study. They had an awesome idea that would work. I mean, they had data and evidence to back it up. This is going to work. It's going to get us through this really hard time. But and I mean, this is part of the example. They didn't involve workers in that process. And the key there, why do you think it's important to involve people, or at least let them involve them and make them think it was their idea, even though it was you really had it first? But the buy-in. Okay, sorry, what?
I said boost their morale. They're like,
yeah. Okay, yeah. So if everyone's like, yeah, that was my idea, I came up with that, then they'll take pride in it, and it'll work, and you secretly know that, well, it was really my idea, but you just, it's all okay. They'll take ownership. They'll take ownership. So just think, I mean, I know it's a simple thing, but you know, we talked about PPE. You let the workers try different gloves, and they all kind of come to a consensus like this one. How much pride are they going to have? You know, subconsciously, they're going to be thinking every time they put those gloves on, yeah, I helped pick these. Like, I like these gloves. So they'll probably wear them. Whereas if you are looking through the catalog or purchasing and you find this really cheap set and you buy that and it's uncomfortable and in the wrong sizes and whatever, and you're like, here, wear these. You know, I don't know numbers, but I guarantee they'll wear them less than if you involve them. So it's important to involve people in the process, even if and like so like what Nadell did and other people who are really good at this. It's hard, but it is kind of like Inception. I refer to that. Has everyone seen Inception?
Great movie. Good movie.
Yeah, one of my favorite movies. If you haven't seen it, they go into people's dreams and try to make them the whole thing is to convince the person who's asleep that it was their idea and not planted there. Anyway, so when I say Inception, that's what I mean is making people think it was their idea. That is the, as someone else I know, like the ultimate mental jujitsu move is making someone think that it was their idea. Well, yes, but now it goes both ways too. Not only the workers, but also to upper management. You have to use that mental jujitsu on upper management.
Managers who take a suggestion from a work, they think they come up with the same suggestion themselves. They'll totally be like, yeah, let's run with this, best idea we've ever had.
Exactly. So now that's not to say that you or management or whoever will always have the best ideas. You might involve your workers, and let's say you don't know what the right answer is, and that's one thing and we might not get to everyone. Sorry, we'll finish. But you might not know the right answer, or you might have some ideas, but maybe there are better ideas out there. And so I think the key is not being able to think of the control that you're going to come up with. Now, we need to be familiar with these and know what some of the options are, but involve everyone in the process, and through consensus and compromise, come up with a control that is effective and that works for everyone. And that will be more effective than, again, you just pushing it down from the top, or if like grassroots. So like the workers are saying, hey, we need this, we need training. Like we're, chopping our thumbs off and stuff, like help us out. And if, so if management isn't on board, that doesn't work. And if management is pushing stuff down, even if it's a good idea, if it wasn't the workers' idea, a lot of times it's like, oh, just another thing we got to do. It's that mental jujitsu. But I think of like with my kids. So if it's late and I'm tired, and I'm just like, go clean your room or go get ready for bed. It's the same process every night. Get your jammies on and go brush and floss. And if I'm like telling, it's not very effective. It takes like 30 minutes to do this thing that we do every night. Get pajamas on and brush and floss. But so there are a couple of things. I know these are dumb examples, but if I make it a race and like I am getting ready for bed at the same time, then like whoever can beat me gets this. And so, it works better, definitely better. So not always, but
And then you gotta shift and do something different.
yeah, you got to mix it up.
Really, you're just building my case for not wanting kids. I'm with you on that.
It's kids are. It's like it was kind of like doing
The thing is you want your kids like that. It'll be comfortable to speak truth to power. That's all they're doing. They're learning
So-
to be independent.
no kids are hard, but they're worth it. They're worth it. It's just it's like climbing a really tall mountain. It's hard. But then when you get the grandkids, then you're like, yes. But when you get the grandkids, then that's like you're at the top, like, ah.
It's like you just keep eating how much sleep you're not getting. Well, the grandkids, you just fill with sugar, give them drums.
Exactly. That's being at the top of the mountain. That's at the top of the mountain where you're like, yes, this is awesome. But I'm gonna. Oh, whoa. Okay, I'm gonna show the pizza party real quick. So this is. Oh wait, can I do that? Let me open up a new browser. This is for incentive programs. I just talked about incentivizing my kids to brush their teeth, but yeah, that's another thing is so like doing it with. So one of the industrial hygienists at Sierrita while I was there said, he would go to the line out meetings where people would get their assigned tasks for the day. So a crew, maintenance, or whoever. And he would be setting up pumps or noise dosimeters on them to take samples. And
No, she's protesting.
well, we better change course then. He said, when possible, he would try to just do basic things with the crew. So like,
Sorry,
that's okay. It's time to go. Yeah. So like he would help them gather their tools and put it in the truck, or just accompany them to the job. Things like that. He said made a huge difference in people opening up to him about the problems with whatever. I mean, he was interested in the health exposures, but he gained their trust, and he showed that I'm not the guy who sits in the office and tells you what to do. I'm one of you, and I'm just, I care. That's what he's saying is I care. And I'm trying to help you. Help me help you. That makes a huge difference. But I don't know why I just thought of that. Is it mad? So be forewarned, there is fake gore in this video. So if you don't want to watch, I would not be offended. Like, feel free to close your eyes or leave right now because we're done. But like I said, I think I laugh out loud about every time I watch this. So again, we talked a little bit about incentive programs. You focus on the positive, proactive behaviors. You don't penalize the negative outcomes like injuries or in injury reporting, because then people won't report the injuries, right? So that's the idea here on the screen. Again, fake gore, please do not feel bad if you don't want to. I mean, it's clearly fake. It's not like it's realistic. Oh. But it gets a point across of why you don't have a pizza party. Oh wait, we did this before and the audio didn't work, huh? Right. Oh, it's because okay. It might stop picking up my voice, but that's fine. My last warning about the gore, if you don't want to, then don't feel obligated.
It is 4:45 p.m. That means in just 15 minutes we will have gone 1,000 days on the job without a single accident. Yeah, well, you know what? I don't say that's right. Believe it or not, it's been over 3 years since Bert here lost his eye. Sorry, guys. I never should have come to work drunk. I'm proud of you guys. You work hard. You work safe. That's why at 5 o'clock, we're going to celebrate your 1,000 safe days on the job with a pizza party. I still got you for 15 minutes. Back to work. What the hell's going on? I don't know. It just got away from me. You're thinking about the pizza party, aren't you? Yeah, I guess so. It's gonna be great. Look, we're all thinking about how amazing the pizza party is gonna be. But we just need to focus. That's right. Let's just calm down and finish our work. Hey, do this. How about if we just go slow? Yeah, we'll go slow. Yeah, let's just all right. All right. He's broken. Get the first aid kit. No. It'll blow the pizza party. What? Going too slow. Yeah. It's like I got too much time to think about it. It's screwing up the rhythm. Look. Let's just do it like we always do it. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. We'll do that. Okay. We always do it. Reggie, you all right? He's gonna cancel the pizza party. No. It's okay. Time for the pizza party. And when I told them what it was for, they threw in some free cinnamon crazy bread. I'm gonna go get some paper plates and some grape sodas out of the machine for us. All right? That's good, boss. Hey, boss. Listen, you guys, it's 5 minutes till the pizza party. Can you guys keep it together? Let's just pretend that we're working, okay? Let's do one without the machine. Good idea. Pizza pots. All right, pizza pots. All right. Here we go. Shit up. Drill. I guess we'll see you idiots in 4 years. No pizza party. Pizza party.
So that was a little over the top, but it's surprising what people will do for a pizza party or some other incentive that's aligned with the wrong behavior. That's it. Unless you guys have questions.
Thanks, Dr. Reed.
Yeah.